Welcome to this demo video on configuring the integration between Wiz and CyberArk Secure Cloud Access. In this video, we'll guide you through the configuration steps to seamlessly integrate these two solutions. Let's get started. First, let's configure OAuth 2 authentication in identity administration. Navigate to the Identity Administration portal. Here, we open Web Apps and click Add Web App. Let's search for an OAuth 2 server. To do so, we navigate to the Custom tab. Here, we select OAuth 2 server. The first step is to configure the name or the application ID of this web app. This will be used later on in the configuration. Under the token settings, we're going to select client credentials. Feel free to change the default lifetime of those tokens depending on your organization's requirements. Under the scope configurations, you have the option to either provide access to the full API, so all API endpoints on the identity security platform, or to limit it just to secure cloud access. That's up to you, and you could choose one of the following. The next step is to provision the application with the right permissions. So we're going to provide access to the SCA API. Search for SCA API and provide the full admin and read-only role. Within the advanced settings, we're going to paste the script that is being provided to you in the documentation. The next step is to create an OAuth 2 server user. Here, we specify the name, and we will select that it's a service user. You can either use a generated password or configuring it manually. Make sure you remember the password or you copy the password for later use. We need to make sure that this service user also has access to the API of Secure Cloud Access. So we navigate directly to the role of SCA API and add the service user to it. We will repeat this process for the read-only role. To allow the integration to validate the identity that is coming from Wiz, we need to allow the user to also have read-only access to user management on the platform. To do this, we're creating a custom role where we're assigning 2 permissions to allow the integration to validate that the identity exists in the IDP. after you've configured the administrative rights, make sure you add the service user to this role. Now that we've completed the configuration of the service user, it's important that we add the service user to the OAuth web server. To do so, we navigate to the OAuth server, open permissions, and we add the service user to it. Now, the service account is all set and we can continue to the next step. For the next step, we're going to navigate to identity flows, where we're going to import the flows and configure the service user that we've just prepared for Secure Cloud Access. We're starting within CyberArk Identity Flows. Here, we can click Import and select the flows that we've just loaded from the marketplace. The first one being Wiz SCA main. Let's repeat this process for all the flows that we need to import. Just make sure when you import them to also click Save to save the configuration. Now that we've imported all the flows, we're going to open up the Wiz SCA main. Here, we're going to configure the webhook that will be used by Wiz. To do so, we navigate to Settings, we select API Access, and we configure the basic authentication with a username and a very strong password. The next step is to configure the authorization that allows the communication between the different flows that we've imported. It is possible to use basic or OAuth 2 authentication. For this demo, we're using basic authentication, where we're specifying a username and the password that we've just created. This authentication allows you to call the API that triggers this flow. So we're configuring this for the SCA main flow, as well as for the others. So once you've completed it for this flow, we're going to continue to the next flow until we completed all of the flows. When configuring these nodes and interconnecting the flows, ensure that you update the hostname to use your identity tenant. That was the final flow. We're now continuing to the next step, which is to configure the authentication for Secure Cloud Access. We first specify a name for this authorization. Next, we select client credentials, and we're going to use the username and password from the user that we've created earlier. You can go into the Identity Administration portal to look up the username. For the token URL, there's multiple options of configuring this. However, it's recommended to use the web app that we created earlier for the OAuth 2 server. First, we specify the URL of the identity tenant. We need to specify the name of the web app. In order to find the web app, you can go back into the Identity Administration portal and search for the web app that was created earlier. Once we specify the token URL, we can click Authorize. Make sure you get an authorized successfully. Now you can save the configuration and continue to the next step. We can now configure the flows to leverage the authorization for the CyberArk API. To do so, let's start in the AWS Identity Center flow. Here, we're going to look for all the CyberArk nodes, and we're going to select the authorization that we've just created. We've now completed step 7.2 from the configuration guide. Make sure you save all the flows and continue to the next step. We will continue with the configuration of the CyberArk integration within the Wiz platform. To do so, let's open up the Wiz platform. On the Wiz platform, we navigate to Settings, Integrations. Here, you can click Add Integrations and search for CyberArk. First, we specify a name for the integration, and we allow the integration to create a new service account for us, so that it automatically has the right permissions to execute the integration. We need to have the URL that allows us to connect to identity flows. So let's go back into identity flows and copy this URL. Here, you can see the flows URL, as well as the basic authentication that we configured earlier. You paste the flow into the Wiz integration and select basic authentication. Wiz is now providing you the client ID and secret that we will copy and configure within CyberArk identity flows. Now that the authentication and the integration is set up within Wiz, we can continue to configure authentication within CyberArk identity flows. We open identity flows again, and under settings we navigate again to authorization. Here, we specify the Wiz authorization. Under OAuth 2, we select client credentials, and we specify the client ID and secret that Wiz has provided to us. Also, specify the token URL that Wiz has provided for us. And finally, it's important to specify the audience that is Wiz-API. Click Authorize to verify that the service account is configured successfully. We can now move on to the final step of the configuration. We are now going to complete the configuration of the flows. We're now going to configure the custom values that are being utilized by this flow. To do so, we navigate to one of the nodes, click on Map, and then in one of the fields you can click to get into the custom values. As showed in this demo, make sure you don't click on one of the custom values and that it gets populated within one of those fields. If that happens, just make sure you remove those. Now, let's configure all of the values that are being utilized within this flow. In the configuration guide, we've provided more examples of where and how you can find all of these custom values within your environment. Once we save the flow, we're going to navigate to the AWS Identity Center flow, and we're going to search for all the nodes with the Wiz logo. For those nodes, we're going to select the authentication that we've configured earlier. In this demo, you see that we already configured it. Make sure it's configured with the accurate authentication. This needs to happen for AWS Identity Center, Azure, or any of the following that will be released. Congratulations! You've now completed the configuration of this CyberArk and Wiz integration. Watch the end user demo to learn how you can start using this integration.